Hello students, my name is Professor Joe Del Russo and I'd like to introduce myself. I'll be taking over for Professor Pittman. The first thing I'd like to do is replace the discussion forum that you guys are working on right now. That discussion forum addresses the utility of assessment tools. Now these are sophisticated tools that are designed for use by clinicians, therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists and the like. And the content which you were required to review doesn't give you any insight on how to apply these tools, nor are you in a position really to appreciate how these tools are applied. Some of the postings in a discussion forum focused on their price and the age groups they're directed at. Most of these tools have a specific use for a specific population, and to suggest that they cost too much is, in a way, missing the point, because these things, like I said, are for professionals. They're going to buy them for use in their practice. The families do not have to buy these tools or pay for them, at least directly. Therefore, I'm replacing that last discussion forum with a different one with a different focus. It is a timely forum, I would think, because it focuses on Adrian Peterson and the issue of corporal punishment in America. Now, this is something that you students can opine about just from your everyday experiences. Nevertheless, I'm going to tell you right now the kinds of things that prosecutors look for in evaluating whether parental discipline is a crime. Bear in mind that corporal punishment, that is striking your child, hitting your child, in order to enforce discipline, to correct their wrong, to encourage desirable behavior, is not a crime in many states. It is permitted. What is a violation of the law is the very wiggly notion of unreasonable corporal punishment. And let me offer you this before I begin explaining to you what it is that one must look for in evaluating whether someone crossed the line. And then I want you to apply what I'm teaching you now to the Adrian Peterson case and explain why. First of all, think about this quote from a child advocate some years ago. It really is food for thought. With the exception of warfare, self-defense, and the often necessary use of force by the police, no human interactions other than the adult-child interaction carries such clear social support for the unilateral use of physical punishment by one party upon another. And let me add this. It is physical punishment that is meted out by someone that is smarter, stronger, more mature, and in complete control of the life of that other person. That's the kind of person who hits some other human being in order to get them to do something that they find desirable. So anyway, you probably can infer where I stand on this issue. And where I stand isn't important. What's important is that we all understand what's reasonable and unreasonable, because that's how we draw the line on the use of corporal punishment in America. Hopefully, I envision one day a society where corporal punishment is proscribed everywhere in America, and follow the lead of some European nations, where we're not allowed to batter our children in order to get them to do the things we want. One day, hopefully, corporal punishment will be the same thing as implied sexual consent in marriage, or disciplining your wife simply because you are the husband and you married that person. Or to take it on a lighter note, smoking in offices and burning leaves in trash cans. These are all cultural anachronisms, products of another time. And one day, perhaps corporal punishment will also be a cultural anachronism. But it isn't. So what are the kinds of things that we look for in evaluating whether a parent crossed the line? Well, I'm going to rely upon the writings of my colleague Victor Vieth up in Minnesota, where he was a longtime prosecutor. He was the former director of the National Center for the Prosecution of Child Abuse, and currently is the director of the National Child Protection Training Center at Winona University in Minnesota. And he offers a very, very valuable analysis on investigating these kinds of events. First of all, you want to take a look at what the suspect's feelings were that led up to the assault. Many parents acknowledge that they sometimes inflict corporal punishment because they, as adults, have lost control of their emotions and are simply hitting the child as an expression of that anger. So, these cases need to be investigated. People need to be interviewed, whether by child protection or by law enforcement or by a clinician in a psychological or therapeutic context. In any event, the suspect's feelings up to the assault are very, very important. Was that person having a bad day? Were they excited about resting when they got home? Did the child break an antique vase that belonged to the suspect's grandmother? Was the suspect just plain angry that day? Was he in a bad mood? If any of those things were happening, if the parent was in a bad mood about other things, then that influences what their thoughts were on disciplining the child. So the question then I would suggest is, was the battering, was the hitting, was the corporal punishment based upon a reasonable evaluation of what would deter that child from future undesirable behavior? Or was this just an outlet for the parent's anger because something upset them that the child did? Important questions we must ask before we determine whether striking your child to enforce discipline is unreasonable or not. The other thing you'd like to do is to take a look at whether the parents use other disciplinary practices, ones that are different from corporal punishment. Do they use timeouts regularly? And why was timeout not an option this time? What was different about the infraction and the response to the infraction and the child's behavior that caused the parent to avoid other kinds of disciplinary practices? Corporal punishment, if used at all, should be a last resort, and it should be used in a way that is objectively reasonable. The next thing you'll want to look at is whether this infraction, whatever the child did, and the kind of punishment that was used, was a rule that was established within the family. In other words, how was the rule created and how was it communicated to the child? Was this the first time the child violated the rule? If not, how was the child disciplined for previous violations? If the rule was developed only after the child committed the offense, the punishment might be inappropriate if the child couldn't have reasonably expected that his behavior was so wrong. And if previous infractions resulted in mild discipline, then why today was the severity of the punishment increased? Again, you won't know unless you investigate. Another thing you want to take a look at is whether we can find out who in the household the rule applies to, and whether the consequences are evenly meted out for breaking the rule. In other words, if the rule applies only to the victim, and if other siblings who do similar things don't get hit, well, then maybe in this case, the discipline, the infliction of pain on the victim is not reasonable corporal punishment, but something else. Perhaps, like I said earlier, an expression of the parent's anger and not an appropriate reaction to the child's transgression. Or maybe, for whatever reasons, this parent is singling out this child and not the other siblings. If the punishment is not handed out in an equal way among the siblings, with an awareness by the children of what to expect when they break rules, then that's something that needs follow-up, and the corporal punishment may be unreasonable. The other thing, and this is kind of leading edge and something that I have a significant interest in myself, is in investigating these kinds of potential crimes upon children, that is the unreasonable and excessive use of corporal punishment, you want to think about the treatment of pets within that family. There is a link between animal abuse, between the mistreatment of pets and the physical abuse of children. And one might be able to understand why. And as I'm recording this, I hear one wonderful dog Harley, who is treated like a king in this house, barking. So if you hear that in the background, please ignore it. But in any event, you might want to talk to the other kids and or the suspect or the non-offending parent about how pets are treated. If you find out that there's unexplained injuries to the pets or pets that mysteriously disappear, this might be a household where violence is the way that problems and conflict are solved. And perhaps there needs to be a significant follow-up. Other things that Victor didn't address, but that are relevant, are the age of the child, the height and weight of the child, where on the body the child was hit, whether implements were used, switches, tree branches, belts, wooden spoons, these kinds of things that are used to enforce discipline in a home. Now, all of these things in and of themselves might not make corporal punishment unreasonable, but it is necessary to look at the full family picture, the full event picture, the relationship between the parties, and the potential offender's state of mind before we can begin understanding whether hitting a child to enforce the rules in the household is fair, appropriate, and reasonable. So I hope this helps you in getting a discussion going about this fascinating Adrian Peterson case. Good luck.